There we go. No, well, okay, so kinda no, not really. But there's there's music playing. You just can't hear it because I kind of forgot.
It was just awfully quiet in here. I didn't know if I lagged out or something.
Yeah, I was waiting to be like, hello everybody and welcome. No, hey guys, welcome to our review of the Legend Reborn for the 10th
Professionals, guys. We've done this for years.
No, it was impressive how long the silence strung on for them.
That you guys knew what you were doing, and that I would wait until someone said something.
Yeah, fair enough. No. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our review of BIONICLE: The Legend Reborn as we celebrate the movie's 10th anniversary on September 15th, 2009. That's when the movie released. So, 10 years later, as with all of our other BIONICLE film reviews, we're going to be taking a look at this movie, what it did right, what it did wrong, and why it is the objective best BIONICLE movie.
Gosh, I'm gonna hate you saying this.
Spoiler alert, I really didn't like it.
Yeah, it's because it's not the best Bionicle movie.
I will echo a very
Not by
similar...
even a small margin.
I will echo a very similar sentiment that I said at the start of the Web of Shadows review, that being, if you really like Legend Reborn and you're very passionate about it and you don't want to hear it criticized, this might be the
This
wrong
is not
video,
the video for you.
You might want to consider clicking off right now and going and listening to us hate on the other Bionicle movies to boost the sense of self-worth that TLR gives. So, yeah, where do we even start?
I mean, we can.
Well, I had a lot of fun watching it again, in a sense.
It's a movie that you can very easily make fun of, because here's the deal.
Well, it
with
starts
TLR.
off with one of the worst intros for a movie I've ever seen in my life, with some of the worst CGI, worst water effects, worst texture, terrible modeling, awful animation for a thing that's supposed to be like how big? Like giant, super big, moving so rapidly fast, and it was like, oh god, especially having seen that scene done in a way better format by a way better animation team previously does not help that intro whatsoever.
That's what I think is really the absolute worst thing. It's because of the ghost animation. Motonui Rising just completely outclasses it in every way. And it's very jarring seeing it represented in this format, which is just very bright and flat, and the jello water.
The jello water.
That was a pretty rough intro, but as a whole, I really felt like the movie seemed like some very budget TV show you'd probably see. I would say even shows that are still around to these days, but it just felt like very, very low budget.
The intro does a good job of setting up the rest of the film. It does a great job of checking expectations, because the rest of the movie
it's not going to get much better from here.
No, it's the only Bionicle movie not made by Miramax. It's made by a new company, Tinseltown Toons, who would later go on, ironically enough, to produce
their logo is
Hero.
also terrible.
Ironically enough, they would go on to produce the Hero Factory TV show for the vast majority of its run. So, in a way, they did transition very nicely into a TV show format with the exact same art style. To a T, and it does work better in that atmosphere. As a movie, it's kind of janky a lot of the times. Like, the actual model work, I feel like, is good. There's enough detailing on the Glatorian and the characters. You really get that sense that they're living in a rough world. All their armor is, like, battered and scraped and scratched and dirty. And they actually do have, some facial animations because of how the mask separates over their mouths. It's less a problem of that and more just about how they're animated and how the world is animated around them. Because Bar Magna looks like complete trash. Half the locations look like
all the backdrops are really bad.
The backdrops are bad. The environments are bland and boring. Nothing is exciting and interesting. The characters themselves are cool, except for when they smile and their disgusting, horrific teeth show up.
I think the thing that I noticed the most about the backgrounds is that
cue the image.
The texture work on them is really inconsistent. A lot of the times the backgrounds, there's a thing in animation where like you'll paint out the backgrounds instead, and then have like the animated characters like on the painted backgrounds. It's not truly there. It's more of a composite image. And it seems like what they did with this movie. But it looks like all the backgrounds were made by like using really like janky photo manipulation. So
Yeah.
you'll have really inconsistent textures where like some of the mountains look really weirdly hyper detailed despite being very far off in the distance. And then you'll have like rocks that are really close up in the scene, like Matanui's walking past them, and there's like no texture at all. So it just looks like a big blob or whatever, or a big block. And I don't know, they looked very, very bad. It was very distracting. And every time there was a backdrop scenery shot, we all called it out.
Yeah. I think the worst one is when they come up on Tejun after they beat the Scopio and like they're looking disoriented. It literally looks like concept art. It's very distracting.
It's really bad.
And then of course the spinning pistons on the characters, which
There was a
People
scene where
love it.
Matanui's piston stopped spinning. I don't know if you guys noticed that.
I did not.
God.
I noticed there were a lot of scenes where the continuity was oddly bad in some instances. Like when Matanui, it was at night. It was in Tessera, the jungle village, and Matanui was walking up, or no, he was with them. A car was running up. He didn't have his sword, and in the next scene, like the next shot in the same scene, he had the sword again.
Hammer Space XD.
Wow.
No, it's not good. And I don't know, like when I was younger, I really liked this movie because it had that it had a set accurate animation style. That was my biggest thing. I could never get behind the Miramax movies because I couldn't like connect with the characters because they didn't look like the people that I own. But there are a lot of sacrifices that have to be made to accommodate that too.
Mm-hmm.
You lose that sense of personality, and a lot of the time they literally do just look like the plastic toys, which can kind of take you out of this world you're supposed to be in.
It's very non-stylized or unstylized or what have you. It reminded me of a conversation I was having with Var a few months ago about the Bionicle comic artists and how all of them have this very distinct style, except for the artists that just take the set and just draw them, like Popman or Randy Elliott. They just take the set and then they'll just draw the set. But people like the best artists are the ones that stylize them, like Carlos D'Anda, Stuart Sager, and so on. This movie doesn't really stylize anything. It looks like somebody took the sets, made some slight modification, and then just like animated them.
Yeah.
It's plain. It feels like it kind of lacks any creative depth. It feels very creatively bankrupt in a way. It's just like, you guys have been assigned to make an animated project using these toys. Do it. And they're like, okay. So they just made the toys and animated them. They didn't really. It doesn't feel like they really did anything with the concept. They just.
But I don't think that's necessarily criminal in itself. Like to have at least the models that they did. I think they just kind of dropped the ball when it came to animating it.
Well,
I think you could have made something good out of that, but
a
they
lot
didn't.
of it's true. The animation is a little janky at times. Also, it's a set problem. Because people always complain about the Bionicle characters in later years having very long, lanky limbs, the overly long hands, and the weird faces, the Glatorian heads that look like Iron Man. And all these problems can be excused away in the sets, but when they're actually in motion and all those kind of rear up at once, like the first scene where Matanui is walking around, he looks like an alien. He looks like one of those like stereotypical depictions of aliens with the long fingers that is gonna reach out creepily, and his disgusting smile and the teeth and the face every time like Akar talks, because his helmet only covers half his face. You just zoom into the Glatorian head, and their arms, which almost stretch down to their feet, they look very uncanny. They do not look right at all, especially when you compare to the Miramax movies, which had relatively good proportions. And like, I've never been one to care about proportions in sets. I do when it's in motion and I'm supposed to like connect to these characters. They look bizarre. It does hurt.
Certainly a flaw, also, just the set design in general.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All those problems really come out when they're in motion.
Anika builds are just like super lanky.
The thing is, these are easily fixable issues in the set design stage that they just opted against doing, because I don't know the process behind making the Glatorian or most of the Anika builds, but yeah, no, it's It's not good.
Dialing it back to the start of the movie, something we forgot to mention. But people in the chat did. Matanui's crazy ride around the universe. LJ, you were explaining this.
Yes,
Off air.
but before we explain it, we got a super chat. I'm not set up for you guys to hear the audio, which is why you're not going to hear anything. So I'm sorry about that. I'm not. It's not a podcast, so I'm not in that mentality. Adrian G donated $1.99 with a message saying the new iPhone 11 Pro looks like the Kanohi Kaku.
Yep, we're all gonna get it just so
No, we're
that we
not.
can get that Kopaka case.
Dude, I would get the Kopaka case.
Anyway, so yeah, the issue is when Matanui gets sent off in the Mask of Light, or Mask of Life, and he gets sent off planet, there are a few major issues with this entire beginning scene. First of all, Aqua Magna has landmass on it, which it shouldn't have at all. There were only ever two landmasses on Aqua Magna. It was Matanui, the island, and it was Voyanui. And they were both gone by that point, so there should be no other masses of land, period. So he shoots off the planet and passes several other planets. We're talking a Jupiter, we have this cluster of planets, and he leaves the galaxy. He leaves the entire galaxy, and then eventually he ends up flying to Barra Magna in the middle of this, of the UDD symbol, and Aqua Magna is right next to it, where canonically he should have left from.
Yeah, he just, he took a trip out there. He wanted to see the rest of the universe.
Of course,
and
yeah.
then he made a U-turn and came back.
I
Kind
mean,
of problem that like in a normal movie I could excuse it and say, okay, I just wanted to do some fancy visuals. It's whatever. It doesn't make any sense, but I can forgive it. Just suspend my disbelief. But in this movie, considering the plot of The Shattering, it's a very difficult thing to just suspend your disbelief about because it goes against everything
Now, Meso,
immediately. Yes.
this actually factors very nicely into a conversation we often have about canonicity in visual media.
Uh-huh.
Should this not be counted as semi-canon?
I would consider it. Again, it's all. We had the discussion about whether semi-canon is even like a valid thing to say.
Which I think it is.
If I can't trust one thing, I can trust nothing. Because the integrity of the work is flawed. So I would just group Legend Reborn as non-canon.
See, yeah, I think because the two film productions are so different between this film and the previous three, it's hard to consider them on the same level when it comes to canonicity, because just the way they were produced and the background behind how they were made is so different. So like, just because this film does something really strange and non-canon, it's like, all right, well, I have more belief that this film was regarded with less. I don't know. It didn't pay much attention to canon nearly as much. So.
Yeah. Even the stuff like reusing Agori designs and the crowds, or minor things like that. All the Matoran in that area and the Matanui robot being the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just stuff like that, which I understand is from a filmmaking perspective. It's a budgetary concern, not wanting to model so many character designs. But it starts to chip away at, like, I can't trust what I'm watching. Ergo,
Yeah, exactly.
I regard it all as non-canon. I'll just stick with the novelization.
All right, well, I will... We'll continue on talking about the movie. There's an issue with the novelization as well, but I don't want to get too heavily into it. I just wanted to ask while I had the thought in my mind.
Cool.
So, fair enough.
Yeah, you're right. It is applicable to that talk.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah, after that, he makes his body, and he fights the Vorox, which has, like, no urgency at all. It's a very
Oh god,
bad-
the fight scenes are so bad. They're so bad. How many times are we gonna sit there and watch freaking what's his face? What's the ice guy? I forgot.
Strack.
Get him, Strack.
There you go, Strack. How many times are we gonna watch him just stand there and like smack a car in the same spot of his sword?
I know, they're just
Over
walking
and
on the
over.
side of the arena while they're like just very slowly fighting each other.
They're
Then all
not
of a sudden
even
it just
walking. They're standing
yeah,
there.
that's true. But I
in
mean,
the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
It's so bad. It was like one of the worst, most boring fight scenes I've ever seen. There was zero urgency. Never felt like anyone was in any danger. There was like no goal. They were just sitting there and just batting swords.
When I was younger, I gave this movie praise because I was very happy to see actual like melee combat in this movie. I know some of the other movies had it, but it was very infrequent. Usually it was a lot of projectile blasts or elemental blasts or stuff. But hand-to-hand choreography and melee doesn't really mean much when your choreography is non-existent. And it's just smack, smack, clank, smack, smack, clank, block, clank, clank, clank. Maybe a kick, if we're lucky. Or
He fights with no fear.
or a quintuple front flip if they're really bold. It's like it's either no movement or ridiculous movement. There is no middle ground. There is no dynamic action to these fights, with the sole exception of them versus the Bone Hunters in the desert. That one was all right. And as much as I meme about Tuma, at least Motonui had some strategy there.
Yeah.
But most of the fights were bad.
And it tied into what Akar was saying earlier in the film, so that one was, I mean, it was lame, but I got it, what they were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, I think that could have been a really excellent fight scene, and I feel like it is a lot better in the novelization. I specifically remember it being better in the novelization, rather.
It is.
It's just
the
how
book was
it's
better.
how it's presented in the movie is so predictable. I don't want to say pedantic. I don't think that's correct. It's just stale. It isn't interesting. It's telegraphed. All of it is telegraphed. It's like a good fight scene is constantly moving. There's a lot of kinetic energy. There are things happening that really display the qualities of the individuals in trying to best the other. In this, it's fight. It's clash, pause. Clash, pause. Clash, pause. Pause, swing. Clash, pause.
Strike, pander to the crowd.
It's really, really sad that the probably the best fight scene is probably the least important one of them all. When they're in that valley with the
Oh, yeah.
Bone Hunters and the Scopio.
Yeah. It's a very like filler action.
And I didn't even realize, well, I mean, I never thought about it before, but then when you pointed out that with Scopio, that freaking Tellurus is part of the brain.
Yeah, they just took the set model.
It's just like pieces of the back of the head. It's not even a Matoran anymore. Or sorry, a Gory.
Nope.
But
It's really bad. But again, it's because of Scopio. Like the actual set is a vehicle, but it's also a beast, and they used a beast in the movie, so they got phoned it in.
a beast with lock-on targeting.
Well, the lock on targeting it.
There we go.
No, I mean, it's got an explanation, but it is... If you don't have the context for it, it's just kind of weird.
Yeah. So they have their fight, Akar and Strack, and we have the famous "Get 'em Strack" line.
Yeah!
And then Akar talks to Motonui about how depressed he is. We get some cringy Metis dialogue, which Metis. I don't know. I think I like him. I think I like the actor's charisma. I don't know if he belongs in the movie. It's hard to say.
He's a really good used car salesman, though.
Yeah, like for what he's trying to do, I think his character works. It's just he feels kind of weird being in a Bionicle movie. I don't know. Character like that, I wouldn't think. Kina, she's hated because of the Wahoos. I don't mind her. It's all right.
Wahoo!
She's very energetic, which I appreciate because most of the characters are boring.
Yeah, it's kind of a breath of life for the movie, even though it's not the best thing in the world.
No.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this scene when Metis is talking to the Bone Hunters, telling him to like go after them in the Thornatus, and he like puts on a cool guy voice, like, "You need to go after them." Like, so you can't tell it's Metis, but like, I just gotta wonder in that scene practically. Just trying to act all tough. Oh, it's good. Oh man. And then the Scopio fight, which that's where Motonui did the disgusting smile, right? That's now being memed.
Yeah.
Right after it's over.
I love it. It was a decent fight. I like how the Scopio was taken down. Even though, like you pointed out, Aldo, they had to make it clear that they didn't kill the Bone Hunters.
Yeah, that's the first time I've noticed that, too. Because Kina, I believe, goes, "Those bone hunters are going to be eating Scopio belly for weeks!" Which indicates that they're alive and they have sustenance to live further so that they can
Well,
eventually
something's
get
gonna
out.
die then.
I mean, yeah, the Scopio is, but it's an animal. Nobody cares. Except for maybe, I don't know, Bionicle PETA. And they've got their hands full with the Ninjago episodes and all the dogs being beaten in that. But
Oh,
Oh my god.
goodness.
it doesn't take any of the risks or chances that any of the other 3 movies take. Oh, okay. The prior 2 films, not the first one. The first one doesn't take any chances or risks either. So, but the other 2 definitely do.
Mononobe should have challenged Tuma to a simple game of Coley.
Okay, you're funny. So they get to Tejun, and then okay. This reminds me of Gresh, which reminds me of some of the character assassination that is committed throughout this film.
Yep.
Firstly, we're introduced to Ranu. And Ranu in any other media is this very stern, very wise, kind of thought-out leader. He's very... Not forceful, he's assertive. He's very assertive. And he definitely, it's his way or the highway, but he's open to seeing reason. In this movie, he's so utterly passive and chicken.
He's weak.
Yeah, he's weak.
The number one scene I always think of when I think of Ranu, the thing that makes him stand out against like Vakama, is when Mononobe tries to convince them to like unite the robot and power it up. He gets like really angry and like doesn't want to let him do it. And he like threatens Mononobe. He was like, I will find a way to destroy you if you betray the Agori. I swear you will never escape me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh wow, this guy's gonna mean business. But in this movie, he's like, we're just Agori. We're not going to fight Torian.
And okay, here's something about that line. I just looked
little
up.
people are so helpless.
I looked up Ranu's BSO1 page, and it says here in abilities and traits, quote, he is also quite quick and strong. He liked to fight in the arena to stay sharp with his fighting skills.
Rip.
It's it's such a character assassination. It's not as bad for Gresh. Gresh is mostly how he is in other media. It's definitely nowhere near as egregious. But it's not wonderful.
I remember Gresh being a lot more serious, but that might just be like an adaptation thing.
He is a lot more serious, but again, he's kind of serious in this movie too.
He is. They try to portray him as like the younger person, but you're right. It's not like he's a jokester like Barracks.
Yeah, he's not making jokes. He's not the usual green Lego character. That he's quippy and funny. But
the downside of that being he's not a super serious edgelord, and he's also not a comedic, kind of a lighthearted character. He's just kind of a dude who doesn't really leave
Christian
much
Faber.
impact.
He's just some guy.
He's just some guy.
Just Christian Faber. No, he did, like Gresh is the most forgettable character in the movie. He contributes nothing. He doesn't really have any good lines. He doesn't have any character moments. Or
I don't know, dude.
He's just there.
He did introduce me to the phrase "clawed out."
Clawed out new blade.
I just got this clawed out new blade.
Yeah. So they stack up with him, and then we get to the deep lore session, the only part of the movie that's relevant to anything at all, where they see they go down to the elemental chamber, which again, LJ, you had a good observation about this.
Now this is an observation I made when I was younger too, because the chamber they go into is the chamber where they made the element lords. Now, there were 7 element lords created. However, there were only 6 chambers used by the Great Beings. In the movie, there are 6 pathways to the center of this chamber. But one of the pathways is the pathway that they come into the chamber through, meaning there are only 5 actual element chambers in that establishment. Now, AT made the observation, maybe they came from above the 6th chamber. And that's possible, but the movie doesn't convey that if it's true. So I am led to believe that it isn't.
Yeah, It's just an omission. I can very easily believe that would be forgotten again. Canonicity called into question. But it's definitely something to keep note of. I don't even know if at that point in the story the movie makers were even implying element lords necessarily.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, this is.
Well, I
where
know the movie
movie
makers
beings
weren't.
are.
I'm just telling you what the chamber was.
Exactly.
I'm just wondering if they took a look at it like, how the heck are we supposed to fit 6 pathways and one to walk in from? Like, I don't know.
Well,
There's
the element lords was one of them sand.
Yes.
They probably omitted sand. If I had to guess
No,
why the movie
no.
makers did it.
They omitted Earth. Or, sorry, not Earth. They had omitted rock. You can see... In the pathways, it shows the colors. And so you can eventually see kind of a tan-looking color. Rock was the one that was omitted.
Okay. Fair enough. And then there's this really weird moment where I just have to question this, where they have the UDD symbol like on the pillar that they press to go down and look at the robot, and I just gotta wonder, how was this shattering like a prophecy? Did someone pull up a comma and see into the future so they could see exactly the shape of the gas that the broken planet would form and exactly how far the pieces would ricochet away?
It was
from
on
each other?
purpose. It was an inside job.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so they could map out this exact symbol and then also put it on a coin and then also like program the monitoring robot with it. It's the kind of thing you would have had to have foresight about to know.
They knew.
So it's kind of weird. And they go down and they see the robot and they're like, "I think we are on the right track." And then that's the last time it's mentioned for the rest of the movie until like the very last scene. So can't wait for Bionicle 5. Very excited. It's gonna be great.
Goodness.
What happens after that? They have the cheesy scene where Akar like smacks the two bone hunters' heads together, and we should talk about this. The music.
Oh, no.
Oh god,
The music.
was
I never noticed it before how bad it actually was.
Oh.
For
There
anyone
are
who-
so many like inappropriate uses of sound effects and like weird like I distinctly remember a scene where Madanui is just like he's watching a fight between Ekar and Strack, right? And he's just standing there watching them, and for whatever reason there's this weird like violin like building up tension in the background for the soundtrack. And it's like it keeps building up and building up and building up as though there's going to be a jump scare or something, and then it just stops.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. It just stops. The sound effect goes away, and then we cut to the next scene, and it's like, why was that there? What
It
are they
remind-
doing?
Having grown up watching 4Kids One Piece, it reminds me very much of that, where they would overdub the actual music with like stock sound effects and stock music cues that are very unfitting to anything. It unfortunately reminded me a lot of that, and it can completely break tension in scenes and just destroy atmosphere, and it's that way throughout the whole movie. Even when the music does fit, it barely fits. Like their idea of what cool fight music isn't really what I would imagine it to be. There's this one scene where Barracks is like running through the maze thing later on, where they get abducted, and the music's like.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
When they were running to the hot springs.
No, yes, no, no. It's very bad, but we're basically it's that way throughout the whole movie, and it's horrible.
Wait, no, come on. There's one good song.
I like
Yeah,
the
the song during the credits was okay.
No. When they're going to Tassara, that song was a jam.
It was a pretty good jam, and then the credits song was also good. So after that, Madanui gives them elemental powers, and he's like, "You're a true Toa." And then we have some Akar Madanui shipping bait. True OTP.
I didn't think you were gonna go there, Messa.
Well,
I definitely ship Madanui in that car though.
yeah, we were pointing out like, oh, Kina and Madanui are the actual ship, but they barely interact.
They don't interact at all in that movie. Like everybody wants to ship Kina and Madanui.
No, I mean,
They say like 3 things to each other.
It's the official one. Like,
Hey,
Kina-
maybe she goes for the bold, quiet types. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, basically. 'Cause,
Meanwhile, Motonui and Akara are just like touching each other in the shoulder, like giving
Oh,
giving
that's
each other
just like
massages and stuff.
That's like a brother-in-war sort of thing.
He's like,
Brother-in-law.
I've never had a friend before.
I have worn many titles, been called a lot of things, but never friend.
Lover.
Okay, hold on.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Akara's like, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Oh my god.
Stop.
Meanwhile, Kina is like
my-
falling all over Gresh or Barracks.
I was shipping her with Barracks.
No, it's the canon thing between Kina and Matanui. Because like in the final book, Kina, I think, like, silently thinks it or something. I don't remember.
No, they have an emotional moment where it's clear that she loves Motonui, but he doesn't reciprocate because he can't feel love, and it's very
not
sad.
canon in his universe.
She breaks down in tears and like runs off as he's about to sacrifice himself. It's a really freaking well done scene.
Yeah, it's not like I liked you, Matanui, or anything.
Baka.
Yeah.
No, it was funny in this film. After that, that's when they go to Tisara. And I love it because Terex gets a super cool voice and Vastus gets the most generic voice in the whole movie. Like anybody could have done that voice.
Yes, even I, Meso. Even I.
I agree. Speak.
I agree. I'm Vastus, a legendary Glatorian. Clearly,
Boy,
anyone.
Vastus got robbed. And they have Vastus and Terex actually have a decent fight scene. There's a lot of like dumb stuff.
Yeah, once
No.
again, the non-important things.
It's not a good fight scene, but it's better than a car and Strack.
I don't. I hesitate to agree. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying I hesitate to agree so readily because a lot of the Vastus versus Terex fight is shoot, 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 throw, charge, clang, clang, kick,
Yeah,
and then it's over.
Just clanging. There was like some dodging, and Vastus tried to like use his weapon as a spear and like stab through his defenses, but it didn't work. And they threw him off the ledge, and he jumped down, and there's some stuff. But Prentice makes the good point. Their thrown axe launchers don't work like they're supposed to. They fire explosive blasts of energy instead of the actual fruit, which is another thing. Starts
It's
to add
such
up.
a weird change. I don't know why they bothered with that modification.
Take this fruit. Yeah. No, I'm kidding.
They wanted to like color code it, I guess. I don't know.
Splat.
Yes. Wow.
And then we have this scene where they rally the troops and they give Terex his cool blades.
Okay.
And, yeah.
I have to ask, which is worse? What is a more cheesier? Which scene is cheesier? That when they're rallying the troops and all holding hands and going, "We fight together," or when Nua going, "'Cause that's what friends do."
Definitely this one.
Oh, really? Okay, fair
I'll
enough.
agree there.
All right.
There's no fight to be had. I could also argue the stakes are bigger here, which is why it's such a bigger deal. They're also talking to a crowd, so they need to have a bigger show. But for pure cheese factor, yeah, it's definitely more here.
Okay. We fight together, 'cause that's what friends do. Just mix them.
And I don't know. From that point on, the movie like really goes downhill. It just kind of spirals into nonstop action and the Skrull being dumb brutes. And then the Metis reveal, which is just kind of lame. It's like, I don't know. The latter third of the movie, I'm not that big of a fan of. It's basically just action. And if the Skrull were portrayed even remotely close to how they were in other media, it may have been interesting. Because they really could have shown them as this insurmountable force. But they were very stupid. They didn't really have any strategy or tactics. They just get buffeted around by elemental powers or smacked out of the way. Even the elite, like Stronius Skrull, are just even worse.
Oh, they're just completely.
They put up even less of a fight.
Yeah.
I
Honestly,
find it very
it's
difficult to care about anything.
it's kind of funny because if you watch this movie in a vacuum, then the Skrull are they're just army chumps, which is fine. So that way they're beaten very easily, which is whatever. If you have the context of the '09 story up till that point, you know how much of an insurmountable force one Skrull is. Just one beat Gresh in a one-on-one fight, and they are notorious for being some of the hardest opponents in the arena, period.
They basically completely destroy the arena system.
Yeah.
And then they actually destroy the arena.
Yeah.
In Battle of Terra.
Exactly. They are a massive fighting force. But in this movie, if you have that context, you just see them, and it's that one trope. It's that one trope where you have this really strong character, but if you multiply them, they get weaker. I don't know what that quote is, but you know what I'm talking about. They did an RVB with Tex.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The multiplication of enemies.
Yeah, I think AT said it. Conservation of ninjutsu. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, I find it very difficult to care about anything past Tessara. It's all kind of meaningless fluff. The Tuma fight was done better in the book. The Skrull were done better in other media. I just don't like Metis, the reveal. Like, I like him being evil. I find it very difficult to believe that he could rally the Skrull army.
I was thinking about that part. Is like, who else could get them to come together? Like, yeah, he's just like insulting their intelligence and
just cheering him on. I find it very difficult to believe the Skrull would follow Metis. I don't know. I can't. There's one cool moment, and it's when the Glatorian all band together their elemental powers. And they fight off. They're like, unity! For unity! And they fire off this mega beam. And it's really cool, and they strike poses. It's slightly undercut by the fact that everybody gets up like 2 seconds later and just turns around and walks away and runs away in the other direction. Like, they weren't hurt at all. They weren't, like, knocked unconscious. They just kind of were like, oh, this is a minor inconvenience. Let's bounce. Like, we have no reason to believe they had enough energy to do that again. They could have just got back up and kept fighting. But nope, the fight ends there. And then the movie's over. So,
well, they put the robot sort of together.
Sort of. They pulled it together into this like anorexic.
It looks like a
broken
a kindergartner's collage.
Yeah, this is what's gonna defeat the Mononami robot, guys. This thing. And then Malum gets shoehorned into the movie as the Scarabax monster. And...
Okay, no, that's not a shoehorn. That's a nice tip of the hat reference to Malum.
Where's Galu at?
Yeah, where's my man Gelu?
He's the Vorox, the Vorox Titan. I don't know, but no, I think it was a fine reference to Malum because otherwise he just wouldn't have shown up.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's like the thing I have the least problem with, but I don't know. I don't know. From me in closing, because I'm gonna have to leave mid-recording.
I mean, honestly, do we really have much more to say?
Not really.
Not really.
We can go ahead and wrap it up.
You guys talk about it then. What'd you think of it? Give your thoughts.
I was thoroughly unentertained throughout the entire thing. I found it very difficult to get through.
Yikes. Did you start browsing Twitter at some point?
Yeah, no, I gave up like towards the latter half. I was just like, all right, I'm just gonna go on Twitter now. So, yeah, I did not like it. I think it's easily the worst of all the Bionicle films.
Okay.
There was
very little redeeming for it. I don't know.
There was a time where I thought it was the best one. But my stance was always, yeah, this movie was cheesy, but all the other movies are cheesy too. Is this one really any worse than the others? I think it's less about the cheese factor and more just about, number one, production values, and number two, the way the story was changed. Like in the other movies, the plot is pretty much, it is pretty much coherent. Makuta is Makuta. The Rakshi are how the Rakshi are portrayed. In Legend of Metronome, the Vaki are pretty much how I would expect them to be. Same with Doom and Makuta. and all the Toa. And Web of Shadows, Rudaka's pretty much perfect. Sidorak isn't. So the cracks begin to show, but it doesn't destroy the movie. That Sidorak's a little different. In this movie, none of the villains act like they're supposed to, with the exception of Metis, so it makes it very difficult to buy into the conflict. And a lot of the characters are changed, like Ranu, and a lot of the Glotorian from how they are in other media, so it makes it feel like it's very isolated from the story which it's trying to adapt. So that, coupled with the production values and just the music, the background environments, everything, it comes off feeling much less grand in scale than the other movies. And I will concede it's on the lower. I will concede that it's the lower end of the totem pole.
All right.
So sad.
Good. No.
LJ, what do you think?
I mean, I'm massively biased toward the movie because it's nostalgic for me. I was super excited for it coming out 10 years ago. So
Same.
I definitely hold a nostalgia for it, a bias. But
It's pretty good, but chapter 2 was kind of disappointing.
I admit, though, it's not a good movie. It's not a very good movie. A lot of the voice actors do a reasonable job, ironically, with the exception of Michael Dorn. I think he does a reasonable job. I just don't think it's as good as everyone else. And this I attribute to the fact that he is an actor. He's not a voice actor. He's a screen actor. He's known for playing a character on Star Trek. But you're putting him up against someone like Jim Cummings, who has been doing voice acting for longer than most of us have been alive. So it's not a fair lineup, I suppose. It's like putting a bodybuilder up against someone who professionally arm wrestles. You know?
You versus the guy she tells you not to worry about.
So
Honestly, I think the problem with this movie, it's a framing thing. Akar should have been the main character. Because his story is the most compelling. The Glotorian who's fallen from the ranks, and he's old, and he's irrelevant, and he's doubting his place in the world. But suddenly, this stranger comes along, and he teaches him the value of friendship, and also passing on to like the new generation, everything.
And also becoming a really good lover.
the problem,
Carrying the torch.
also,
But Montevideo just isn't compelling as his own.
the issue is, it's not even. I agree with you for the record. It's just Matanui is not an interesting character in this film.
No.
He's not. He doesn't learn anything. He doesn't grow. He doesn't change throughout the entire movie.
Shouldn't even be a character.
Well, I think he should be a character. He should just be an arrogant jerk the entire time. Because he comes from this great power, this huge robot where he rules over his own universe, to being 7 foot tall on a planet he knows no one in.
And they do nothing with the concept.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So I think that not only do I agree they should have had the focus be on a car, but then they should have this guy come in, kicking things around like he owns the place, going, I want to go back to my world. And then he learns to be a better person and a decent fighter because of a car.
Pretty much. It could have been the Emperor's New Groove of Bionicle.
Yeah.
That would have been a good movie.
You threw off my groove. So,
as it stands, we can go ahead and end there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say?
It's all right. I think, as I said before we came here, I think all the Bionicle movies to me are somewhere in the 5 to 6 range. I don't have like a order since I haven't seen the other ones as recently as this one. There's definitely, like LJ said, a bit of nostalgia for me because this came out on my birthday.
Happy birthday.
10 years ago. Thanks.
Hey.
But I don't know. I can tolerate it because I like the ideas more than the actual execution. There was a lot of promise, as some say, for this movie. I like what it represents more than it actually ended up being. It's sad that everybody's like really incompetent in this freaking movie. It's sad Michael Dorn kind of dropped the ball on the voice acting, but I mean, partially explainable, as LJ said. A bunch of the other voice actors are good, but yeah, I don't know. A lot of characters are incompetent. A lot of backgrounds are very drab in the sense that it seems like they're just very tiny landscape and structures in this very barren desert. There's like nothing out there, and it's kind of painful to look at.
As is Baramagna usually.
No, but I mean, like in general, deserts still have more than just sand. But
All right.
anyways,
Let us
it's okay.
let us in.
Yeah. Okay. I'll cue up the outro music, but again, you're not going to hear it. So, Muscle,
That's fine.
you can go ahead and
Thank
carry
you
us.
all for listening to this teardown of TLR.
Please don't be
There's
loud.
stuff.
Please don't
There's
be
stuff
loud.
to appreciate about it.
Yes.
But we're not going to talk about that too much because, all in all, it kind of leaves a negative vibe, especially because it was the last movie. But if you disagree with us and you want to talk about its positives or talk about its negatives, share them in the comments below or on the TTV message boards, board.ttvchannel.com, and start a conversation. Share some new points of view on the Legend Reborn and celebrate, or at least discuss, its 10th anniversary. That'll pretty much be all for this one, as well as all the BIONICLE movies. Stay tuned for the 20th anniversary of Mask of Light
Oh my gosh.
in 2023. Until then, I'm Messa.
I'm Var.
I'm LJ.
And I'm Envy.
And happy birthday, man.
Wow, thanks.
Hopefully you enjoyed this on your birthday.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.